right, and now a segment that we have not yet done on Purely Academic, but we have been wanting to. You guys have been asking us to do it. We used to do it all the time on the weekly stuff, and that is Listener Mail. We were actually going to do this in the February episode. We had a couple of questions that people had just kind of been sending me, and I'd been saving for a rainy day, but then I decided to add more for the March installment, and we have a big old listener mailbag to work through, and I'm excited to do this again, Sean, because this was always fun.
Yes, yeah, I'm always happy to hear what the listeners are thinking about and what they're curious about.
All right, well, let's go through these. First off is just this one I had thrown on here because this was a Letterboxd comment I got when I was writing about, I had gone to see Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, and I wrote a little bit about it on Letterboxd, and Jimmy Jonathan Lee, who we'll have questions from later on here as well, in fact, I'll just move his up here, asked me on Twitter, "It's interesting you've been more positive on Nolan lately, because you were initially more down on Tenet, and you and Sean were more critical of his Batman trilogy than most people. What is the change in outlook? Just curious." So that's a question for me, and I will just take it. I don't think anything has really changed in my outlook on Christopher Nolan. I think if you are like, if you remember us talking about his stuff in the last couple years of the weekly stuff, that was mostly us talking about his Batman movies, and I did turn on those, revisiting them, and I don't like them. But like, other than that, it depends. Like, Oppenheimer, I have a very complicated relationship with that you can go read my reviews on my site about my complicated relationship with it. Tenet, I didn't like at first, and then I watched it again a few years later, and I did like it with some reservations. And then there are ones that, like, I always think have been great. Like, I think Interstellar, I believe at the time I thought that was his best movie, and I still do. I think I like pretty easily his best movie. And rewatching it again recently just kind of reinforced that for me. I still like Inception. I like particularly some of his early stuff, like the Prestige, I think is very good. And I think my overall thesis on Nolan continues to be tremendously talented craftsman who is very good at getting other people to do great work too. His cinematographers and editors and everybody he works with. He empowers actors. He gets a lot of good work out of people. I don't think he is the Stanley Kubrick figure he aspires to be, in that he is someone who like changes the grammar of cinema through his efforts, and that's fine. I don't expect anybody else to be Stanley Kubrick. But, I think I think Nolan is a director always worth watching and engaging with. Sometimes I like what he does, sometimes he doesn't. But that's some directors are like that, and that's fine. Like, I guess I don't have a grand thesis on Christopher Nolan that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm curious, Jonathan, what you think about the fact that he's making an Odyssey movie. That is an adaptation of the Odyssey, which when that news came out, I was very surprised by that, because that just seems like, one, that's a hell of a thing to try to adapt. Like, it is not ready-made for film. Like, that is an awkward thing to try to convert to film. It's never really been properly done before. Even like the miniseries stuff has typically not been done, other than there's one like Italian miniseries from the 60s that is basically impossible to see. I've never actually watched because it's almost impossible to find other than bad YouTube version of it. So it's like, on the one hand, it's like, it's very difficult of a thing to adapt. It also just feels like an odd thing for Nolan to go to when you look at the kinds of things that he has done. Like, it's just nothing about his filmography to me slaps of classic epic poetry, in Homer. I just find it very weird.
Yeah. I mean, here's my first initial thought I want to say is that we don't know anything about it.
Sure.
All we know, the only sentence that has been released, looking this up again, is the studio announcement, which says, Christopher Nolan's next film, The Odyssey, is a mythic action epic shot across the world using brand new IMAX film technology. The film brings Homer's foundational saga to IMAX screens for the first time and opens in theaters everywhere July 17th, 2026. And we also know some casting details. But like, when I hear someone is doing The Odyssey, there's so many things that could be. Like, that could be trying to do a relatively straight adaptation of Homer, which is the events of the poem in something resembling that order. Or it could be like a very like different kind of thing where it's more like fantastical, not rooted in Greek times. There's like Darren Aronofsky's Noah movie, which does the Noah story, but plants it in such a way that it looks like it could either be the distant past or a distant like post-apocalyptic future, and it's not like strictly rooted in like biblical time and history. It could be like one or two major events of the Odyssey that you are dealing with, you know, like because you can't do all of it. Obviously,
yeah.
like you can't do it in the order the poem is told, or else you would have, you know, the first like 20% of the movie being Telemachus walking around talking to people about his dad. And it's just like, that's not a Nolan thing. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think he is, I will say this about Nolan. Since the Batman movies ended, he has felt fairly liberated to experiment. And I haven't loved all those experiments, but I do appreciate he has not gone back to anything resembling franchise fare. He has not done anything like that is an obvious, easy commercial ask. Like Dunkirk, Tenet, Oppenheimer, none of those are obvious, like big commercial works for a director like him. And he proved with Oppenheimer that, like, that's my favorite thing about Oppenheimer is that he proved you can just make a big R-rated like biopic and people will come to see it and it'll make $1 billion if you market it right. Like, that's awesome. So I'm like super curious. You know, I do think, like, as you say, there's nothing in his body of work that really speaks to a relationship with mythology or mythological storytelling. Like, if Denis Villeneuve announced this, I'd go, yes, that makes sense, because he did Dune. And he did his Blade Runner movie. There's something mythological in like tenor about those. Nolan is fairly literal, and that's fine, but it does mean I don't really know how to imagine this, but I also like feel like I don't know enough to have any idea what it's going to be.
Yeah, I just it is a thing that I've occasionally, obviously as a high school English teacher who has taught the Odyssey. I don't teach it at the current school I'm at, but I taught it 2 years at my previous school. Like, it is a thing my brain is constantly going back to, is this like, what the fuck is Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey? Because it's like, if they hadn't have said it's like mythic action bringing Homer's classic epic to life, I would have just assumed that it was a movie called The Odyssey that had no connection to Homer's The Odyssey. Because that's how, like, idiosyncratic that combination is Nolan in his body of work and his style with what I think of The Odyssey. So I'm just very curious. I wonder, are like... is like Athena going to be a main character in a Christopher Nolan movie? Like, is he just going to have like Athena in there? Like, is that going to happen? Like, what the fuck is that movie going to be? I'm very curious.
Here's the one thing that I can say will definitely come from it that will be good, is you're going to have a lot of kids and young adults wanting to go read The Odyssey because of this. And that's cool. Like,
yes.
This movie will have a cultural impact because it is Nolan, because he's like the only director who started working in the 2000s who has cracked the like Spielberg code that used to be more of a thing where directors are kind of franchises unto themselves. I think there's maybe some younger directors who are getting there. I think Villeneuve has moved in that direction thanks to Dune. But like, yeah, that'll be good. Bookstores will be selling copies of The Odyssey, and I think that's cool.
Yes, and it'll have a picture of an actor on the front of it now instead of some like Greek urn or whatever.
Yeah. It'll have Timothée Chalamet. I don't know if Timothée Chalamet is in his Odyssey movie. I didn't check. It just feels like Timothée Chalamet is going to be in that because he's in everything.
You should just, I know that they're not doing this, but you should just cast Sean Bean again from Troy. He played Odysseus.
He'd be so Troy. Good. I've always wanted that.
Such a good piece of casting. You know, they didn't really do much of that character in Troy. You know, Troy is like an interesting movie that also is, you know, bit off a lot more than it could chew. But it always felt like a shame that you never got more Sean Bean Odysseus.
That would be great, and then Timothy can play Telemachus, and there you go. Yeah. All right, Jimmy Jonathan Lee on Blue Sky also asked us, to Sean, on Superman, thoughts on the Silver Age lore like Supergirl, Kandor, Krypto, the Legion? Should these aspects be shown in more film adaptations? And I'll just add here, Sean, we haven't talked about the James Gunn Superman trailer yet, which kicks fucking ass and has Krypto in it, so maybe we can comment on that too.
Yeah. Like, I definitely think that's a good trailer. Although Man of Steel hurt me so bad that I refuse to get excited about a Superman movie based on a trailer. Because
James Gunn is a much more promising filmmaker for this than Zack Snyder, to be fair.
It's true. But I was hurt very bad. If you wind back the clock on our podcast a very, very long time ago to before Man of Steel came out, we were both, like, the trailers for that movie were so good and so promising. That movie was not. So I certainly think that it is at least going to be a good movie. But I'm it's the hedgehog syndrome. I'm just protecting myself.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think certainly Crypto, the super dog, is a fun thing to include. Obviously, Supergirl is a like evergreen character. You can put Supergirl in anything. I think the question is like, what kind of Supergirl is it? But yeah, in terms of like, I haven't read a huge amount of Silver Age Superman comics. Like my knowledge of Silver Age Superman is more through it being readapted through like Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman and stuff like that in terms of like direct interaction with it. But I certainly think there's always space to bring, and I think this is kind of where we're heading a little bit with the superhero stuff, at least in a certain dimension of it, is bringing some of that goofier stuff back that was so in vogue in the Silver Age, where everybody and their grandma was fighting space aliens every other issue, whether it was Superman or Batman or Daredevil or, you know, like the third issue of Spider-Man has Spider-Man fighting an alien invasion. Like it's just a thing that very quickly they stopped doing that with Spider-Man because it just did not work. It's a bad issue. It doesn't make any sense. But that's like the Silver Age was like super, you know, 1950s, 60s sci-fi inflected kind of stories like that. And sort of Superman was maybe like one of the most coherent of those because it really fits with his overall vibe being a space alien himself. So yeah, like I think you can bring back some of that stuff. Again, I think Crypto and Supergirl are evergreens. You can always bring them back. Crypto has never truly been absent. It's just not in like the mainstream Superman adaptations, but Crypto has been like in stuff constantly, but it's mostly been in cartoons. They made that 3D animated movie not that long ago. That's probably terrible. I never saw it, but it had Crypto in it.
Which one is that? Is that
I forget what it's called, but it was a thing. I remember seeing the trailer for it and being like, that's probably not going to be good.
Okay. I can figure it out later, yes. But yeah.
But yeah, I don't have any deep thoughts on Silver Age Superman, but it would be fun to bring some of that back. What they need to do, I think this is a Silver Age character. They need to bring Mr. Mxyzptlk back. Like that's got to be, you know, they can't be the first villain that Superman fights, but it should be the second villain that Superman fights. That's what I'm going to say.
They did have him on the Supergirl show, the Melissa Benoist show, and he was on several episodes, and they were very good, and that was very fun. You know, here's the thing: James Gunn definitely likes Silver Age, and so like. There's a reason both Crypto and Supergirl are priorities for him in this new DC. I'll say this. I'm excited for James Gunn's DC. I think like there's enough good signs coming out of it. I have yet to watch the Creature Commando show that is the first thing they did, but I think it just finished on Max, and it's supposed to be really good. His Supergirl adaptation, we know we're going to meet her in the Superman movie, and then the movie itself is coming soon, and that is based on the more recent Supergirl run that was very acclaimed in the comics. But the actress in that is I forget her name, but she was in House of the Dragon, and she's the young Rhaenyra in the first season of House of the Dragon. And so like all of that is promising. I just love that like not only is Crypto in the new movie, but like the cornerstone of the first piece of advertising of it is him, which just tells you how much James Gunn's personality is in this thing, which like that's all I kind of want is a director with a fucking voice, like, you know, giving us a real interpretation of Superman. I guess Zack Snyder did that. I just don't think Zack Snyder was the right voice for Superman.
Yeah.
But anyway, you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We'll talk, and definitely, I think we need to make it a priority that we do some Superman episodes this summer to maybe talk about some past movies and definitely review the new one, because I'm excited to just see what it is.
Well, isn't that and the Fantastic Four movie, aren't those both coming out like around the same time? They're both July.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that will probably be what that episode is for Purely Academic, probably.
Yeah. I guess no one asked. Thoughts on the Fantastic Four trailer, Sean? I'm curious.
I kind of similar to the Superman one. I think it looks good, but also I've been hurt. So,
yeah, fair enough.
In more ways than one with Marvel. Obviously, you have the old Fantastic Four movies, but it's interesting that this and that Superman movie are both coming out around the same time because I think they're going for very similar vibes. You know, if you're talking about Silver Age, I mean, on the Marvel side, there is no more Silver Age ass superhero than the Fantastic Four, the team of the Fantastic Four. Like they are. I mean, obviously they both, like Fantastic Four #1, started the Marvel Age, and Marvel dominated the Silver Age of comics. But also their whole vibe, again, is all like weird space alien shit, and it's kind of cosmic and out there and weird. And so it's interesting that we're getting both of those around the same time, where it feels like the movie companies are obviously well aware that the superhero stuff has not been hitting. recently, and that there needs to be some sort of like vibe change in order to try to connect to the audiences. And so they're going for this more sort of colorful, optimistic, old school vibe that either literally is a period piece in the case of the Fantastic Four, or is hearkening to this kind of older era, which is what that Superman thing is. With him like being in a world with the Justice Society and stuff like that, which is part of the new premise of that movie. So it's really fascinating to me that both those movies are coming out, and it feels like they're both informed by the same kind of cultural energy, and it's these businesses trying to react to that and figure out where are we going, and they've both come up with seemingly similar answers, at least in terms of the marketing of those two films. So I'm very curious how they're going to come out, how similar, how different are those two movies going to be, how successful are they going to be. Like, I think that's a pretty fascinating element that's going to probably define a lot of what the next several years of American blockbuster filmmaking is going to be.
It is. I will say, I think, like, here's the thing. On an island, I think that Fantastic Four trailer, all signs point to yes. The cast looks right. The aesthetic looks right. The time period. The fact that, like, the fact that the Baxter Building is there and the Fantastic Four are celebrities and Galactus is in it, like, oh yeah, these people know it. This is, like, so different from the other Fantastic Four movies if you've seen the old ones. Like, all signs point to yes. The difference is James Gunn, one, is James Gunn. He is, like, I think he has proven himself he is the best at doing comic book stuff in the 21st century. I think if you put together his Guardians movies, what he's done with DC with Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, he just is, like, in this era of, like, the interconnected world and all that, he's been the best at this. And Superman is just straight up written and directed by James Gunn. And it is a fresh start. He does not have to work with any of the Zack Snyder stuff or any pre-existing. He got to cast it all himself, right? This is all just, he gets to make a movie. Fantastic Four First Steps is still part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know it will have to connect into everything else because they're doing an Avengers movie where the only people we know are in it are the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, played by Robert Downey Jr. And also, Fantastic Four is a movie with, at the moment, 6 credited screenwriters. And its director is Matt Shakman, who is a very talented TV director, and I don't want to take, like very talented, but not like an auteur vision who has like a really obvious voice. So like, I do think like there's a diverging path here. My biggest fear with the Fantastic Four movie is that everything we're seeing in the trailers is a bait and switch, and that will be like the first 20 minutes of the movie, and then they get pulled through a multiverse portal and are in the MCU. Like, that's my big fear about that movie. And I think, like, and inevitably, eventually, even if the full movie is them in the 60s, they're going to have to get pulled out of it to be in an Avengers movie. So, like, you can't really invest in anything they're doing over there long term. Whereas, if the Superman movie has a good Lois and a good Lex Luthor, you can keep working with that for years to come. But that's not how this Fantastic Four movie is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're definitely right that in terms of like the behind the scenes talent, it's a lot easier to be confident in James Gunn than what like Marvel has done, because Marvel is like it's taking a half step, whereas like DC has taken the full step of they just completely trashed everything that they did, deservingly so. They have thrown that all in the garbage, and then they threw that garbage in a toilet. They threw that toilet in an even bigger toilet, and they flushed both of them at the same time and said, we got to get rid of this shit and put it in like the nuclear waste dump. And so there is something promising about that for sure.
Yeah. So we shall see, but that'll be a topic for the summer. Jimmy also asked us, Jonathan, on the 1980s, is it fair to deride that decade as the blockbuster era? Because there was still room for the indies and mid-budget movies too. No, I would not deride the 1980s. I think, in fact, the 1980s were the last great decade of American cinema. I don't think you can say that about the 90s, 2000s, or 2010s, that they were great decades for American cinema. I think other parts of the world, you can make different distinctions. You know, Hong Kong in the 90s, great decade for cinema. America in the 90s, no, just not. Like, there's always good movies, but I think the 80s is the last time you had the industry firing on all cylinders. Because yes, you had a lot of blockbusters, but a lot of those blockbusters are fucking good. A lot of them were made by interesting filmmakers. The 80s is also the last decade where we got new movie stars. We have not had durably, possibly the 2020s have changed this, because you now have the generation, what I think of as the Euphoria generation, either people from the show Euphoria or people of the age group of the show Euphoria who have avoided superhero movies like the fucking plague and therefore been able to build actual like brands as movie stars. Zendaya most obviously, but also your Timothée Chalamet's and Sydney Sweeney's and Hunter Schafer's, and Scott Glenn's a little older, but Scott Glenn too. And like, it's possible we're getting back to movie stars, but history will have to decide that. But for now, like from the 90s to the late 2010s, we did not produce movie stars in this country. We just had ones who were born in the 80s and 70s, like Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise continued to do their thing. So yeah, 80s, like great decade for cinema. Are there commercial trends in the 80s that were problematic and that came back to bite Hollywood in the ass? Yes, but also the 80s are like insanely dense with good stuff. Like a truly great decade for American cinema.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it is because of like it has these big, what we think of as like the proper blockbuster movies. And so that's obviously there, but those are also driven by that generation of actors or directors like Spielberg who are there making those movies. So you have this like incredible generation of directors up and coming that do those. But then yes, you also have this room for these smaller movies, the still kind of a little bit more in that sort of 70s model, if not necessarily in that 70s style. And that's where we just get so much of our modern pop culture is still generated through that, with like franchises like the Terminator and things like that started in that way. I think it is definitely the 80s. Great decade for movies. And I would generally agree with your assessment for like the broad industry. Obviously, there are lots of good movies that are made in Hollywood, in America after the 80s, but it is not, the density is not there.
Go back and look at the top 10 lists at the domestic box office for every year of the 80s. The number 1 will usually be a franchise thing you recognize. But like 2 through 10, you'll be fascinated by what kinds of things were like people going to the movies for. And it's stuff that if it was made now at all, it would be dumped on Netflix and no one would ever know it existed or talk about it. And it's like, it's depressing how far we have fallen from then.
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, you still had a full, like, a range of genres that a filmmaker could make and get it, like, with a big audience. And now it's like you can make, like, 2 or 3 different kinds of movies. But if you want to make a romantic drama, no. You want to make a comedy? Not really. There's just not a lot of space for broader genres of film. You can do horror. You can do superhero stuff, but really superhero stuff is sort of like sci-fi fantasy action movie. And you can do like non-fantasy action movie. Those are the 3 genres you get.
Yeah. All right. Calmera-san on Blue Sky says, these listener mail episodes were always fun. If you could see any unfinished film, but you must erase one of that director's existing films to do it, what would you see and what would you delete? I like this question.
This is a brutal question. I mean, I was like, when you say like unfinished film, the immediate thing that pops to mind is Orson Welles, because he has about 5,000.
My answer is it's The Magnificent Ambersons, and I would delete The Immortal Story, which is his French TV movie, which is interesting, but not like a full, that's almost like a cheat. But also that unfinished is a weird word here, because The Magnificent Ambersons was finished, and then a studio butchered it, and we don't have the footage anymore. Maybe it's out there in the world, no one has found it. But like if you're talking about a movie that like the director literally like had to abandon, that's harder because those are usually the abandonment would be like at the pre-production stage. Like Kubrick long wanted to make a Napoleon movie. What Kubrick movie do I delete to get Napoleon? I'm not sure because Kubrick's movies are all pretty good. Maybe one of his like very early ones, but it's also tough because he never shot anything for Napoleon, you know?
Yeah, you're right that like it's a little bit hard to pick one of those that's like a totally unknown, what could that movie have been? I mean, I definitely agree that like Magnificent Ambersons, just because that, up until it got butchered was a Citizen Kane scenario. So it's like potentially in terms of like he had complete control over it up until the point that after the movie was made, he no longer did. So that's obviously like a big one. That you could have. You could, of course, like go for the Other Side of the Wind, which sort of exists today in a form. But that would have been his last movie. I'm looking at his filmography in terms of like another one you could, if you wanted to go for a non-TV movie to dump, you could go for like The Stranger or The Lady from Shanghai. Both of those are really, I mean, all of his movies are really good. There's not like one to just get rid of. Like Mr. Arcaden is one that's like a very interesting movie that's maybe rough around the edges.
I don't want to get rid of it. That's another one that you could argue we want the finished version of, because there is no definitive cut of our Mr. Arcaden. I mean, he also started shooting a Hamlet movie he never finished. So Orson Welles is like the answer here, but it's also a brutal thing to like say which one you would delete. Yeah.
Oh, right. This is the where I was trying to remember. There's one movie he's trying to make forever, Don Quixote. That would be probably one of his truly unfinished ones that there's like no version of it really exists. That would probably be the one, because he worked on that forever.
Yeah.
But yes.
We did eventually get a Beetlejuice sequel, but for a long time, the script for Beetlejuice 2 was a movie called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. And because there's so many Tim Burton movies I could erase, like get Alice in Wonderland out of there, then I want Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. I want to see Michael Keaton in the Beetlejuice makeup, but in like Hawaiian shorts. Yes. And I liked the Beetlejuice sequel, so, keep them both. But there's all sorts of Tim Burton movies I can erase, so that one's easy.
Yeah, that's a totally other way to look at this question. It's like, what's a director who you would not mind deleting one of their movies, and there's probably like a better one that you could replace it with? I had not thought about it that way. That's a very interesting way to reframe the question mentally.
I know. There's those. Yeah, but I think you and I both immediately went to Orson Welles, and that's funny. But
he's got to be the most famous director for having unfinished projects, because it's most of his career as a director was him scrambling to make the movies that he did make, and there are like countless projects that he started and aborted at some point because he didn't reasonably have the funding to do it.
Yeah, and time has changed this so much, because if you did this 10 years ago, The Other Side of the Wind had not been finished by Peter Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
If we did it 20 years ago, we wouldn't have the current collection of Mr. Arcaden. If you did it 30 years ago, Touch of Evil was still missing. So, who knows where we'll be in 20 years on that. But do you want to move on to our next questions?
Yes.
All right. Toon Emperor on Blue Sky asked me, who are your 5 favorite film directors? And I probably should have... and you can answer this too, Sean, if you want to try to list 5. It's tough. I'm going to go off the top of my head and try to just do this from the hip. All right?
Okay.
Miyazaki Hayao.
That's a good choice.
David Lynch.
Yep.
Kurosawa Akira and Ozu Yasujiro. And then I have to pick a 5th. And I guess... King Hu. There we go. The Taiwanese martial arts director. Well, not just martial arts, but those are the things he's most famous for. I think I could be happy. That could be my top 5. I intentionally didn't try to slave over this because I thought it would just make me miserable. But I think if that's a top 5 I'm happy with.
I imagine you could also potentially would Terrence Malick potentially go on that list? I'm trying to think of
not to that 5. Might be in the top 10, but it wouldn't break through those 5.
What about Wong Kar-wai?
Wouldn't break through to those 5. But you're just named Wong is definitely top 10 for me, but I don't think he would break through to those 5. I'm actually pretty happy with that as a top 5.
What about Kubrick?
No, I don't think Kubrick's even in my top 10, and I like Kubrick. That's just if we're talking here about who resonates with me personally the most, Kubrick is probably top 20, but not top 10 or 5.
Yeah, because I think Kubrick would definitely be in my top 5. Kurosawa would definitely be in my top 5. I haven't seen enough of King Hu's stuff to reasonably put him there. But what I have seen is so good. Obviously, I could, it'd be very easy for me to justify Ishiro Honda for the Godzilla stuff and not Godzilla stuff, honestly, and potentially put that on that list. Orson Welles, for sure. If I want to go for someone modern, Yamada Naoko in terms of a film director. We just did her most recent movie, The Color Within, for Japanimation Station. Obviously, she's so young that it is maybe a little bit premature to put her in that compared to some of these other people who either have had their full careers or have had the equivalent of an entire career. But if you're just looking at in terms of the how good her movies are and how consistently good they have been and in the time frame she's released them, I would be willing to put her there temporarily on the list as this person is incredibly good.
I'm thinking, again, firing from the hip, of what my second 5 would be if we wanted to round this out to a 10. And I'd throw Wong Kar-wai in there, Orson Welles, Takahata Isao, And Tomino Yoshiyuki, who is more a TV director than a
Yeah.
film director, but he's Tomino Yoshiyuki, so he's in my top 10. Easy. And then my 10th spot is where I freeze up because then it's over and I can't pick more. But there's lots I could go with there. Yeah. And my mind, as you can see, goes towards people whose careers are like effectively finished.
Yes.
Or we have a full body of work. So you're 100% right about Yamada Naoko, but I don't think of her as being canonizable yet, if that makes
Yes.
sense. Yeah.
But it's one that, like, is very easy to have seen all of her movies, you know, compared to, like, some of
Yes.
these other, like, I've seen most of Stanley Kubrick's movies, I've seen most of Orson Welles' movies, I've seen most of Kurosawa's movies, but I have not seen every single one of them. So it's a little bit easier to just definitively say, well, I mean, if I'm saying, like, what's one of the best directors, I'm not trying to rank anything, you just said, like, come up with some of the best directors whose movies you've seen. Honestly, Yamada Naoko would come up off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is just a tough one because it's like especially for me, it feels like I'm putting in some kind of like grand statement that I cannot take away. If we're talking about like current people who are currently working, another one for me would be Hong Sang-soo, the South Korean director. A historical director who I've seen a lot of, but I always want to see more because I haven't quite like finished him the way I have others, as Mizoguchi Kenji,
Yes.
who like
Yeah,
same era as Kurosawa and Ozu. And I think if I'd seen all of his major works, I'd probably have him in here because he is as good as it gets. So yeah.
Yeah, in a similar place, I'd put Kobayashi Masaki, the director for Harakiri and The Human Condition,
Yes.
where I've not seen all of his stuff, but I've seen enough to know that, like, if you know, he's kind of in that tier for me.
Yeah. So tricky stuff, but it is fun. So there, I at least got you a top 5. And now I feel like I need to like start thinking about this and make this an official list, and it could be fun. Because I just at my new place reset this up, my shelves out here that I have arranged by director. Because it's like the way I like to have it, where I can just see like, here's the whole body of work, and like I can go to that shelf, that shelf, that shelf. And I had about 30 different director collections. So I should just at some point list those out of who do I have like actual collections made of, because that would be a good starting point for this question.
But I think we could definitively say that, like, at least in terms of the shared list, like David Lynch and Kurosawa, that's like if you want to do one American director, one Japanese director for like live action film for the purely academic, those would be like the two you could just throw up there.
That one's easy, yes. And Kurosawa is just the gift that always keeps on giving.
Yes.
So there you go. Toon Emperor also asked us, what if Gundam characters came to the real world? How would you react? I think most of the oh shit were fucked. Like, it depends on the Gundam. If you're doing, Gundam Build Fighters, that sounds awesome. That sounds fun. I get to hang out with the mom. You know, this is great.
Yeah, I get to hang out with mom. I'll teach the kids. You know, they can come to my class, and we'll have a cool time. I'll let them, build their Gundams during, study hall.
But if, the Zabi family shows up in the sky one day, no, I don't want to be around for that.
I'll say, if Char came to our world, I'd follow him.
Oh yeah,
whatever he's in, I'll join his movement.
Yes, I think that's correct. Yeah. Maybe telling on ourselves here. Anyway,
if Char was here, we wouldn't have this shit. Wouldn't be going on right now. That's all I'll say.
Here's another question he asked me, and I don't know how much you even want to get into this, Sean. Based on what we've seen so far, what is Trump's term going to look like? Bad? It's
yeah. Bad, unknowably bad is how I would answer that question. Like, there is like the end of American society and civilization as we currently understand it to be in a Weimar Republic being taken over by the Nazis-esque way, or there is the like it does horrible damage to the fabric of our society, and countless people will die or be harmed physically, like psychologically, financially from his reign as president, but there will be some sort of we have a proper election and we vote someone else in, and like things go back to what would be a like vague Biden-esque normal. I think those are two potential outcomes, really.
Yeah, maybe those are the tail outcomes here.
Yes.
So we're recording this on February 16th.
That's
Sunday.
good. That's important context. That is really important. Yes. Who knows?
This will be coming out in early March. So you're hearing this about 2 weeks after we record it. And I will say at this point, about a month into the Trump administration, it's been worse than I expected. And I had very, very, very cynical expectations. But I think what has been worse is that it's the speed at which they are moving to dismantle stuff, and it is the way Trump has empowered even worse people than himself. That is what scares me. Because I will say, Donald Trump himself as a man does not scare me that much. He's a fucking idiot. Now, he's an idiot with a machine gun, and that's bad. But, like, idiot with a machine gun, we did live through once. And I don't want to use the sentence "we made it through." 1 million Americans died of COVID. It was really bad. But, like, we did figure out how to fight that. What is worse this time is that Trump has more successfully empowered, I think, even more evil, awful people than he is, like an Elon Musk or an RFK Jr., who I just think are even worse human beings who have the potential to do even more damage. And that is what scares me. The only potential sign of optimism at all is that the courts have held up better than I was hoping. We're right now living through the whole Mayor Eric Adams scandal and the quid pro quo over that, and we are having a massive wave of resignations. And like, I am glad that and this has been across, Republican and Democratic appointees, including even some Trump appointees telling the Trump admin to go fuck themselves publicly, and that's very nice to see. I would like to see that from the Democrats. I would like a functioning opposition party. I would like, some Republicans in Congress to remember that they are a co-equal branch of power. I would like Republicans to remember their own personal ambitions, because, like, Trump is trampling over that too, because, our constitutional system does rely on the individual branches being, like, wanting power, and one of those three branches has decided to stand down, and that sucks. So yeah, it's really bad. Like, I do think we're not at the worst case scenario in terms of outcomes yet, but in terms of what the starting point was, we are at the worst case starting point.
Yes, and I completely agree with that analysis. And it just feels like there is a much more committed effort this time to actively degrading the, like, foundations of governance in the law. Where that was like, that certainly happened in Trump's first administration, but it was not like this. There was not this sense of, like, we're trying to actively dismantle all the sort of blocks and restrictions on executive power and to consolidate all that power into, like, a single figurehead. And that effort is so intense in terms of what they're trying to do right now, that is the thing that is very frightening. As you say, right now, the courts, and on February 16th, the courts are fighting that. But it would not be difficult to ignore that. The question is, what happens if Trump and his cronies ignore the blockades by the court and they just insist on doing it regardless of court orders? That is, like, the huge question, and, like, what is the response to that? And I have no idea.
Yeah, so far they have not shown an appetite to have a fight in that way, but they could any day.
Yes.
If there's any other, like, cause for optimism, it is that, and this isn't even a cause for optimism, but this is just, like, everything they are doing is truly horrifically unpopular. Like Trump is also, like, in terms of governing, in terms of maximal popularity, doing all the wrong things. Like, the kind of mandate he did have coming out of that election would be pretty easy to parlay, I think, into political success if he just focused on economy, immigration, the stuff that people actually liked. Maybe not good people liked, but people liked. But he's not. He's not focusing on any of that. He's doing his tariffs. He's doing all this shit. We did see the consumer price index come out, and we had the first jump in inflation in, like, 2 or 3 years because it was going down steadily over the Biden administration. And, like, people will react if inflation rages again, which is what all of his plans are doing. The question there is then, do we have free and fair elections? And I do think people who are just insisting, of course we're going to have free and fair elections, are idiots and should not be listened to. Because, like, I hope so. I really hope so. But we can't just assume that, or else it won't. Like, if vigilance, maybe we get there. But if we're not vigilant, we're definitely fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think, like, a weird hope right now is kind of what you're saying, that Trump and his administration will be so fixated on some of their, like, ridiculous shit that they want to do in terms of international, like, foreign policy stuff, which is the tariffs, his, like, very terrifying and unsettling like suggestions towards things like annexing Canada and Greenland, which is fucking,
or much more immediate things like what he's planning to do in Gaza. Like the Gaza thing is an actual plan. The other stuff is talk at this point, but
but like I think the sort of hope is that his administration will be fixated enough on that stuff that, as you say, is like unpopular. It's like nobody wants this, and people, as he progresses further down that path, the more the average person is going to see the impact and the negative impact of an America that is no longer dominant on the international stage and is now, in like aggressive wars and like trade wars against all these people who used to be our allies. Like that's going to quickly knock America down a lot of pegs on the international stage in terms of power and influence. It's the exact kind of thing that a China would want, right?
Yes.
And certainly Putin wants, is for Russia, is that it just sort of like really erodes America's international power base. But like that distracts enough energy that the like total dismantling of the American government does not proceed. Like that's like that's like my optimistic outcome. I don't know if that's not a good, that's like a good outcome, but that's my most optimistic outcome of like what would happen, and that those international ambitions go unfulfilled. That the annexing of like foreign territories does not actually occur, though I know that Trump desperately wants to, because he sees people like Putin going for land grabs, and he wants to have that on his historical record.
Yes. I mean, here are the two pillars of causes for optimism. Is one, that American public opinion is historically extraordinarily thermostatic, which is to say that it shifts against whoever is in power. And that happened to Trump also in his first term.
Yes.
So like, he is not Teflon. He is not invincible. So like, there is that. And also that he is really fucking old and unhealthy. And like, my biggest source of optimism is that hopefully he just dies. Like, hopefully he just fucking dies before he is able to do his third term bullshit or whatever. Hopefully by the end of this, we're running against J.D. Vance, and that dude is hella beatable because he's a piece of shit that no one likes. So, yeah. That's my hope. The actuarial table comes for us all.
We will see how things go from our viewpoint again on February 16th.
Yes. All right. Lucas on Blue Sky. Much more fun question here than the last. Toon Emperor, your questions were great, but that last one was a bummer. And that's okay. Sometimes we got to have the real talk. But Lucas on Blue Sky says, I've been a fan and dedicated listener of you guys for years. Thank you. I enjoy the way you and Sean think through and engage with media with passion and a critical eye. For example, I've always enjoyed the Matrix trilogy for its fun action and delightful Keanu Reeves charm. Yet your Matrix retrospective episodes showed me new layers of those films I may have missed. I was wondering, what are some key steps you take to break down and critically evaluate media? Are there any books or other methods I too can use to find my own hidden gems in my favorite works of art? Anyways, thanks for reading my question and for the many, many hours of enjoyment you both have given me with the podcast. Well, thank you very much, Lucas. And this is a tough question. I had a student come to my office hours last week effectively asking me a version of this, like, how do you get good at analyzing and writing about film? And I kind of went for a little bit of just like, because the uncomfortable answer is it's just time and experience. Just the more you watch and the more you think with a critical lens, and the more if writing is one of the communication methods you want to use, if speaking is one of the communication methods you want to use, however more time you spend doing that, even if at the outset you don't feel good at it yet, the better you will get. I think one thing that's cool with film is that, like, the video essay era means that there's just a lot of, like, really good film education for free online, that I like to use in my classes sometimes even too. Mm-hmm. I think one of the best channels that just does good, like, film 101 style analysis is Patrick Willems on YouTube. But like, if you want deeper, all kinds of media analysis, there's like so many, I would feel bad almost starting to list them off. So there's like lots of good stuff where you can like listen to other people, and maybe we're one of those too. Thank you. But yeah, I don't know if there's like any one like trick I can give that is like, here's the onboarding course.
Yeah. I think for me, there's a few things that you want to do. So there's one is you need to just engage with a lot of whatever the medium is. So if you want to learn, like, get better at analyzing film, you obviously have to watch a lot of movies and lots of different kinds of movies. If you want to get better at analyzing literature, you have to read lots of books and lots of different kinds of books. You can't just stay in one lane. And this is true of like movies, music, video games, whatever it is. Obviously, like visual arts, which I'm totally ignorant of, like fine art, analyzing painting, stuff like that is just so outside my wheelhouse. So engaging with a wide variety of whatever that medium is, that's obviously very important. Then also engaging with, to some extent, theory around it, right? So engaging with what is like the criticism that exists in that field and what is like, you know, the sort of theory around it. Obviously, the easiest way for that is as education and going to a college program, which will tailor make that and filter that for you. And so both of us having, you know, gone to college for our respective things, for you film, for me literature, like that's where I learned a huge amount of that stuff because I had a professor who knew a lot, filtering out what are like the critical things to understand about this field of theory, whether it's psychoanalysis, structuralism, postmodernism, whatever it is. Obviously, you can also read books or watch video essays to get taste of that theory. But I think the most important thing above all that stuff is learning how to engage whatever it is actively. So if you're listening to music, you have to practice active listening. So you're not just sort of passively listening to whatever the song is saying or in the music as like a whole, and stop being obsessed with and fixating on observing it as a whole, like holistic, congealed single thing, because all pieces of media are made up of component pieces, and active listening or active viewing or active reading is about breaking out whatever those component pieces are. And it's easiest for me to do this example with music because I think it's the clearest. Because if you're actively listening to music, instead of listening to what is the holistic sound, you're trying to listen to what are the drums doing in this song? Like, what is the rhythm that the drums are playing? And listen, put your ear right onto that part of the track. Then you listen to it again, and now you're like, what is the guitar part doing? And you put your ear there, and you're listening to the guitar. And then you're like, okay, well, what is the bass guitar, or like whatever, like bass section doing in this part? And you listen to that, and breaking out those component pieces, that's the only way you get a better understanding of whatever the whole is. What that would be for movies would be actively watching. So you are consciously aware of what's happening in the frame. You're looking at not just what is the story, you're thinking, okay, what is this shot? Where are the actors in this shot? And what are the actors doing? And maybe you watch the scene that way. Then you think about, okay, how is the editing happening? When is there cuts? And what is that doing? Okay, well, what is the framing of like the geographic elements of the shot? So like the background and those objects, and how does that divide up the frame into different components? And then obviously you can also be actively watching for like the dialogue and what is this plot doing. For books, that's a lot harder because books are not so obviously sort of broken out into component pieces, but being very actively aware of the prose and the language. So not thinking just about like what is the literal meaning that is being delivered here, but how is the writer constructing these like sentences together, and how are those sentences paired together into, or like grouped up into paragraphs. And so how are those constituent elements delivering whatever the idea is? And you can focus on maybe the rhythm of the language. You can focus on what are the things that aren't being said is a big thing in lots of books. So it's like, what is the things that are not actively being described versus what are the things that are actively being described? Because anything in a book that is actively being described is a thing the author thinks is intrinsically important, because they would not include it if they didn't think it was important, and then interrogating what the meaning of that is. So that to me is like the essential thing. If you want to get better at critically breaking down media, it's practicing the active consumption of that thing is, and breaking it down into the constituent pieces and the choices being made by the people making that piece of media, and interrogating why are the choices being made. And then you can try to fit that back together into what that whole is. But because you've broken it out into its pieces, you now understand what the whole means on a much more fundamental level.
You gave a much better answer than me, and I feel slightly humiliated.
I've been doing this a little bit longer than you, Jonathan, in terms of the teaching thing. So
fair enough. No, and you've had to describe it to, I assume, young people more often.
Yes, it's a lot easier with literature to do this with poetry, because poetry is so artistic that it's a lot easier to break down. Okay, what is the rhyme scheme doing here? Okay, what is the rhythm pattern doing here? Okay, well, what is the stanzas and how do those work? Well, what is the repetition of these things? So with poetry, breaking down the constituent pieces is a lot easier than with prose.
Yeah. Well, also shorter. You can, a lot of poems, are a page, and you can just really spend an hour breaking it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm teaching intro to film studies right now, and so I'm thinking about a lot of this kind of stuff. And, the way I and many others teach that class is that we go topic by topic, and we do a week talking about narrative structure, and then we get into cinematography and editing and sound design and mise en scène. And, like, most movies could be taught for most things, right? Because all movies have cinematography. Most movies, like 99.9% of them, have editing. All movies have mise en scène. Many movies have plots. But you focus in on one thing for each movie, and you try to guide the students towards that example. One piece of advice I give on day one that I think is, like, crucial for any of the art forms we're talking about is assume everything is a conscious decision.
Yes.
Assume every element of a piece of media you're engaging with is there by choice. And maybe sometimes that will be a wrong assumption, but usually it'll be a right assumption. And then think about why it was done that way. And I think one of the biggest things for me when I was coming up as a student, getting into into grad school and being more serious as a scholar, was moving past the I don't like this phase of analysis to the why don't I like this phase of analysis to the what am I looking at, why is it this way piece of analysis that is, like, free of evaluative judgment, right? And that is, again, just a process that takes time, but it also means that, if you are frustrated by something, but your reaction isn't to rail against it, but then to start thinking, why is it like that? You'll learn a lot. And I say that from experience. I don't say that from, like, an on high, like, you should be like me. I say that from some of my favorite movies ever are movies I initially dismissed because I then thought about it and tried to learn from it. So I think that's part of it too. And also just, you watch stuff in a different way when you have a critical eye. You and I have talked about this a lot on the podcast. Like, when we watch an anime for Japanimation Station, it is just different than something I'm watching for fun.
Yes.
And even if I'm not doing anything else, even if I'm not taking notes, even if it's just me, my physical action is the same. I'm sitting on the couch looking at the TV. Like, sometimes I get home from a busy day at work and I had a screening and I've been doing a lot of thinking. And even if the anime we're watching is something I love and enjoy deeply, sometimes I'm like, you know what, I have a different show in my back pocket for when I am tired and need to, like, watch something with half my brain off. Right now, that is, I'm working through maybe I talked about this in the show and tell segment, the Disney, the Netflix Daredevil series I'm rewatching in preparation for the Disney Plus Daredevil series. Now, I love that show and I think it's very good, but I'm not watching it with I'm not intending to teach it. I'm not intending to write an analytical essay. I'm just enjoying the characters and Daredevil kicking people and all that fun stuff. And it's just a different form of viewing.
Yeah, and that's, like, a great example for me with that is our Kyoto Animation season of Japanimation Station, where most of that was stuff I had seen before, and all of it was stuff that I really liked. But particularly for some of the stuff that I had seen really early on, like Haruhi Season 1 and Clannad, when I watched that, I would have, particularly Clannad, I binged the shit out of that show, and I was just, like, totally just melted into the story, right? And was just like letting the whole show wash over me. And that's a totally valid way in the sort of normal way that most people experience media, and that's totally fine. But I would not have been able to have, like, we couldn't do a 3-hour podcast talking about season 1 of Clannad if that is the only way I'm watching it, because then the main thing I'm bringing to the conversation is I thought it was funny, but it also made me sad. Yeah. Like, that's what it is. Versus, like, when we did that, I had done research into the background of the show, and so I was aware of, like, who was the overall director. I was aware of, like, who were the episode directors and who did the storyboarding. And going into each episode, like, I was looking at and thinking about, like, the frame and what is the frame doing here. And also, since I'd seen the show before, I'm more actively thinking about, okay, how do these ideas displayed in the early parts of the plot, how do those then lead up to or reflect the things that are going to happen later in the story, since I know what the whole thing is. And that's just, like, it is, as you say, it's a much more mentally taxing way to engage with a piece of media. So I can only do 2 or 3 episodes of a show that way. Like, the show that we're watching right now while we're recording this for Japanimation Station is a show I watched, like, 12 years ago. I think I probably watched it about 3 sittings originally because I just loved it and I just, like, voraciously consumed the whole thing. Now I can't do more than 2 episodes. Not because I like the show less. I like the show more this time I'm watching it. But, like, it's such a meal trying to, like, think about all the stuff it's doing and what it's doing visually, but also, like, the historical context and how it's, like, playing off of all these different social elements and all these things it's doing. There's a lot there going on with it that I can't be that active watching 5 or 6 episodes in a row. That's just too exhausting. In the same way that like it is, I find it personally extremely difficult to try to practice active listening for an entire album straight. I can't do that. Like I can listen to an album in the background, that's fine. But if I'm like really trying to actively like consume the song, I can't do that. Like instead I usually do like 1 or 2 songs if I'm in the mood to really listen to something on a deeper level. I'll pick 1 or 2 songs and listen to it in chunks back multiple times, listening to the different parts. And that's a very enjoyable experience. I can't do a whole album that way. Like I would need a lot more stamina. So that's like just part of like what that critical eye thing is once you get good at it, it's exhausting. It's like very exhausting. Like I was, when I was in college, I was not like that. It's like only now that I'm like, oh my God, I can only do 2 episodes of this and my brain's going to get fried.
Well, and I'll say this, your process changes over time, too, I've found. Like, I used to engage with stuff critically by taking a just metric shit ton of notes. Like, if I look back at my materials for my master's thesis, I would watch a movie with my computer in my lap and the movie on the TV, and I would be typing through the whole thing. And I would take like 3 to 4 hours to watch a 2-hour movie, taking all kinds of notes. And that idea gives me a nightmare now. I don't do that. Like when I wrote my dissertation, I didn't do that for anything, because I do that for reading sometimes because I want to extract the like text that I might use. But it's because it like, one, it gives me too much data, and it's like just on a practical level too much to work with. But I also stop seeing the forest for the trees.
Right.
And like there's a balance to strike, and so a lot more of it happens in my head and through writing quickly afterwards, just getting ideas out. And I don't know if one approach is right or wrong. I just know what became right for me over time. So it changes.
Yeah, because I do what you're talking about, of where I will watch the thing and then I will go jot down what were like the thing, like what's like the 5 things that really stood out for me, and I'll jot that down if it's something that I want to take notes on.
Yeah.
But I do not good and don't like taking notes. It's like the thing with it's for me with reading as well. Like I never liked annotating while I read. And there were like some teachers in college that like tried to force me to do that. I'm like, that's just not how I process this. Like I will read a chapter and then I will try to process that chapter, but I've never liked stopping in the middle of whatever the chunk is and then doing that. Like I need the chunk and then I can process once I can put that chunk down. So it's like maybe I can listen to the chorus of the song and then try to process that, but I can't listen to 5 seconds of the chorus and then stop and then listen to the next 5 seconds. Like I can't do that. That's just never worked for me.
All right. Connor on Twitter says, not necessarily a question, but I desperately need you to cover Star Wars Andor after season 2 airs this year. Noted. We will keep that in mind. I am a very, very big fan of Andor season 1. I forget if you've seen it, Sean.
Yes, it's very good.
Yes, it is really fucking good. I think that's probably a good idea because that is the final season. It's just a 2-season project, so that would be a fun thing to do. All right, Silver on Blue Sky. This is a good question. If you could redo one episode of Weekly Suit Gundam or Japanimation Station, what would you choose? I have an answer.
I think for whatever reason, the thing that jumps to my head is Zeta Gundam. Not because I don't remember if that episode was good or not. Like I just remember being like, we should have tried to figure a system a little bit earlier with Weekly Suit Gundam of breaking up some of the bigger shows and like trying to do Zeta Gundam. I mean, that kind of almost got sprung on us in a weird way of like, you just got so obsessed with Gundam so quickly.
Yes.
It's far faster than anyone anticipated. That I remember like Zeta Gundam, I think I would have wanted to take a little bit more time with, but we just didn't know exactly what Weekly Suit Gundam was going to be at that point.
My answer is related to that too, because if I look at the overall Weekly Suit Gundam project, basically the original 60 episodes, I'm mostly pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
Like as a very long season 0 of Japanimation Station. Here's one giant thing I would do differently. I wish we had done Unicorn Gundam in release sequence, so later in the 2000s.
Right.
And I wish
we didn't do it that way.
No, we did it with the rest of the Universal Century stuff because we weren't planning on it being a full show yet.
Yes. And had you already watched it on your own or so? Like, I remember you went rogue at one point and just watched a bunch of shit.
We weren't planning a podcast. Yes. I wasn't rogue. I just was watching stuff. So, yes, that's how it happened. And I think the Unicorn Gundam episode is good, But in my ideal scenario, I wish we had done it the way we did Gundam The Origin later on, where in the release chronology, and I wish we had done it as individual OVA episodes, the way we did Origin. I think that would have been a cooler way to cover that. And then you can like nitpick, like, would the Turn A Gundam episode have been better if we'd done 2 chunks of 25 episodes apiece? Maybe, maybe not. It's a very long episode. That means we get to look at the whole shape of Turn A Gundam. It also means there's maybe some corners we didn't get to talk about in depth as much. But that's, that's maybe neither here nor there. But I think the Unicorn Gundam one, we did go back and fix some of it, because we did like have brief conversations about stuff like 08 the MS Team and 0080 and all of that stuff, and then we did later do a full like mini season of the OVAs, and so a lot of that got fixed. So again, I'm mostly happy with it, but that is where I would revise it.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I think, some of the early ones as well. I think it would be fun to, if we had hadn't fully developed the full kind of research component that we now do, that particularly Japanimation Station has taken much further. That we developed over the course of Weekly Suit Gundam, that became a thing that I did more and more. But I think that's also one of the things with Zeta Gundam is there's so much around the context of that show that I'm sure we did not really touch because we were not really equipped to touch it in the way we originally did it. And partially just because of the people we were at the time, and also just the circumstances of us recording it.
Yeah, the modern format of Japanimation Station basically coalesced in the Lupin season.
Yes.
Where it became formally writing out research notes and other stuff. And then we've both added on to that with time. You obviously took it to a different direction and level with KyoAni, and then this season that hasn't premiered yet, we're kind of swapping back and forth. But that's where I think weirdly the Lupin the third season is our most important season as a production, because it's where we kind of solidified the arc of everything from Weekly Suit Gundam episode 1 to then in terms of an actual plan, and I think the show's been better since then. So
I agree.
Yeah, but we're on the same page about that, so that's good.
So just, wait for the Weekly Suit Gundam high definition remake where we go back and we scan all the original materials, and do it in high definition, and then we also, insert what we think, if George Lucas style, what would we have done? And we don't actually record it ourselves. Instead, we use AI versions of us to record conversations we wish we had in the original episodes. But we wanted to capture the same ages of our voices at the time, so that's why I went with AI.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is we need to get an AI software where we can feed in the Turn A Gundam podcast and say, now spit out 3 additional hours about Turn A Gundam and see what that does. Boy, that would be brutal. Okay. Let's see. Levi on Twitter. This is a question we get every so often, so we'll do it again. Any intention of covering Cyberpunk 2077 ever? I finally played it now that it's fixed 5 years after release, and can confirm that after pushing through some initial obnoxiousness and making it to Keanu, it's actually an incredible game up to par with CDPR's Witcher 3. Would be cool hearing your takes on the game if you ever get around to it. Bonus PS5 tip for if this ever happens. Play in 30 FPS ray tracing mode, specifically as it makes the crowd density a good enough level to make the city feel alive. Game runs great now. Sean, you probably can do something even more fancy with your PS5 Pro. I don't know if it's patched for that.
I don't think it has a Pro patch. I assume that the frame rate is more stabilized and the dynamic resolution is relatively higher, I presume.
So here's the thing. I think we've answered this from other people before, and I guess my answer is this. In a hypothetical scenario where I have infinite time, yes, I would probably like to play Cyberpunk 2077. In the real world where I have limited time and there's new stuff coming out all the time, probably not anytime soon. The backlog is so heavy. I want to play all the fucking Yakuza games. I want to play all the Dragon Quest games I've never played. And I'm definitely not, especially because of the negative associations I have with Cyberpunk from its bad launch, I'm not jumping to that before I get to any of that stuff. So maybe, but not anytime soon. I would assume when Witcher 4 eventually comes out, maybe that's when I feel like I need to look at it as on an academic level, see the missing piece between Witcher 3 and this. But other than that, I'm not sure when I would get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to play it, but it's exactly what you're saying in terms of time. I actively check for when it's on sale, and I think if at one point it goes on a super deep sale on PSN, I'll probably buy it. When I would play it after I buy it, I do not know. But like, and weirdly, like one of the reasons why I want to play it, honestly, isn't just the game. I want to watch the fucking Cyberpunk 2077 Edge Runners anime that's supposed to be really good. And I know that I could just watch it without playing the game. But I also know that if I watch it without playing the game, I'm just going to fucking buy the game and start playing it immediately. And so I feel like it just feels like a summer break needs to line up in such a way that that can happen for me. And so far, that has not happened because video game releases have been fucking weird forever now, and games just come out in strange places. And oftentimes, like, I'm not actually like that interested in a lot of the holiday games anymore, so I end up playing lots of weird games over the summer. So who knows? But yes, it's like if I had the time, I do really want to play it. Like, I'm sure it's really good. You know, I'm in a situation where I never bought it originally. Jonathan, I think you have more distaste for it because you got.
I played like, 10 hours of it. Like,
yeah, you got the Xbox One X Cyberpunk 2077 edition and all that shit. You know, you were full in, man. I pulled the ripcord. I saw like the change in the fucking winds. Like something was happening. I'm like, I think this game's not going to be what I want it to be, and I canceled the pre-order. It's just like I'm not doing it. You went all the way in.
I went all the way in, and I guess that's the other thing that maybe holds me back more, is I did play a good chunk of it, so I know what the beginning is, and I like, there were technical problems aplenty. I mean, it was a very broken game. I also just didn't like it. I didn't like the story. I didn't like the characters. I didn't really care for the world. I didn't care for the combat style. And like, it is one of those games with such a monstrously slow opening. And that is the number one thing for me getting into a game, is if a game has one of those awful slow openings where you have to fucking walk through a room matched to someone else's pace for like 3 hours while they exposit and the credits go by. I just can't. I just cannot. My attention span doesn't work that way. It's one of my most hated things about Western games is the awful, like, walk-through scenario. It's why I'm never going to play a fucking Bethesda game again. It's because none of them, like, I need, the games need to start like fucking FromSoft games do. Just drop me into the fucking world and let me play my fucking game. Unless you are Like a Dragon, Yakuza, and your cutscenes are so good, I would happily watch them as movies. I don't want your 5-hour openings where you get to the story after I've played the length of another video game. Like, and to my knowledge, they didn't fix that in Cyberpunk, because that's not a fixable thing. That's just how the game is. So I will probably never get over that hump, is my guess.
Okay, so I think Jonathan's answer is going to be actually no. You said maybe before. I'm just going to tell you it's going to be no for Jonathan. For me, maybe. If the stars align.
Yeah. All right. True Life Dude on Twitter asks, do you guys believe Goku when he says he's never kissed Chi-Chi?
No. I also don't think that scene from Dragon Ball Super doesn't say what I think people think it says. So it'll be my answer to that question.
Yeah, the translation is a little off.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't believe it either. He has 2 children with Chi-Chi. You know, they had to make love. She is someone who would want to kiss. I don't think Goku would be so hesitant at that. Is he the kind of husband who comes home at the end of every day and passionately kisses his wife? Definitely not. Has he given her a kiss once or twice in the past? At least. I think that is the answer.
Now, I'm going to go further. I'm going to say I don't think, not only has Goku kissed Chi-Chi, I think it hasn't only been on the mouth.
Jailcock on Blue Sky. I don't know how to actually pronounce his name. How do you think it is,
that
Sean?
Transition from what
How do you expect? What do you think it is? Jalekok? It's Jalekok.
Jalekok?
Yeah, better than Jailcock. Jalekok on Blue Sky asks, since the movies are taking forever to come out, are you going to cover the Hathaway's Flash novels, maybe alongside High Streamer and or Beltor Chica's Children? For people who are not immersed in the world of Gundam novels, yes. Those are other Tomino Yoshiyuki Gundam novels. The Hathaway's Flash trilogy, which is becoming the movies slowly. Beltor Chica's Children. High Streamer is the original version of Char's Counterattack. Then they made the movie. Then he wrote Beltor Chica's Children as a revised version of the story. So we have not nailed down the plans for our Tomino-a-thon season. I do think it would be fun to do some kind of episode on his writing. Either the easiest thing to do would be the Mobile Suit Gundam original trilogy novels, because those are officially out in English and you can go buy them. And we always want to do stuff that listeners can follow along with. The other stuff, there are fan translations of, but they're not official. The Beltor Chica's children's manga is coming out here, but that's not the book. So I don't know. but it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's definitely like a maybe. I think for me, one of the things I struggle with that is that I want to read them in Japanese, and his stuff is harder than where I'm at with Japanese, typically speaking. Like, I've tried to get through his Mobile Suit Gundam novels a couple of times, and I've gotten pretty far. But it is his writing style is more advanced than where I'm at currently in terms of my Japanese. So that's like one of the things that makes it hard. Obviously, I could read it in English, but I don't want to. I want to try to read it in Japanese.
Fair enough. So there's that. He also asked us any hopes or expectations about Tomino's final anime project, Hibiko Yamato. And I had to look this up, and I couldn't find much clarity on it. I guess I haven't heard a lot about this. Have you?
Yeah, I don't know that much about it.
I know it's something he's apparently been noodling around with for like 20 years. But it's not like no one's greenlit it. It's not like definitely happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, I assume it's... because I know who Himiko is historically, and I know like the queen of the Yamato people in like ancient Japan. So I know the historical context, but I don't know anything really about like what this project or at what point it would get off the ground, if it will.
If Tomino wants to make another anime, we will be there. That's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, I can guarantee you, whatever he makes next, if he makes something again, we will cover. I mean, obviously, we know that with our Tomino season. I don't know if we've like 100% nailed this down, but obviously we're thinking about like the G-Reco movies and stuff like that, which we have yet to cover. So anything Tomino related, we will get to eventually.
100%. And finally, this week, Parker, who is a friend of mine from the University of Iowa, he was a grad student while I was there, he asked me on Blue Sky, Jonathan, what are Phoebe's 4 favorite films of all time? Phoebe is my dog. She's always on the podcast. You just don't hear her. She lays on my bed while we record and sleeps. And I asked her, and we had a long, in-depth conversation. She asked me to follow her on Letterboxd, and her 4 favorite films of all time are 101 Dalmatians, the original Disney classic, Lady and the Tramp, also a Disney classic, Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers.
It's a good choice.
Because that's her favorite Scooby-Doo. And this is crazy because I haven't even seen this one, so I don't know when Phoebe, sometime while I was at work, she got on the Criterion Channel, and she's a big fan of Alan Renee's 1963 existential psychodrama Muriel, or The Time of a Return. And I've never even seen that one, so Phoebe has good taste.
Have you actually made a Letterboxd for your dog, Jonathan?
No, I have not.
Okay, if you do that, I'm going to just say we can't podcast together anymore.
No, Instagrams for people's pets is a whole thing, right? Have other people done Letterboxds for their... Because I don't think that's a thing, but that would be funny.
That has to. There is absolutely 100% certainty I can say that there are probably a disturbing number of people that have made a Letterboxd account for their pets and have done the exact joke you have done here, which is here's a bunch of dog movies, and then here's, some like art film, I can just guarantee you that has happened many times.
Okay, now I kind of want to do it as a performance art thing where I make her a Letterboxd and I routinely just put on some movies that I've watched, but in the review, I just type out like the word bark over and over and over, and that's the review every time. And everything gets 5 stars.
Everything gets 1 star because Phoebe just doesn't like any movies.
Oh, she doesn't like movies?
It's just like the great irony, she lives with a film professor, but she's like, films, I mean, really, it's the 21st century. Like come on. It's anything that's longer than 15 seconds, I ain't gonna watch it.
So, yes. Also, I mean, the people in the movies don't come out and give Phoebe treats or head pats or take her on walks, so I don't think she has any real use for them. I do want to explain, by the way, the Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers, genuinely, I like that Scooby-Doo movie.
Yeah.
But also, while I was making this joke, I did look up a list of Scooby-Doo movies, and I found a blog called ScoobySnacks.com where someone had ranked all the Scooby-Doo movies. Sean, how many Scooby-Doo movies were on that list? Do you just want to take a guess? How many movies?
18.
48.
Holy shit, that's a lot more. Oh my God.
This guy had 48 Scooby-Doo movies, and I guess that is a full list. And not only did he have all 48, and that includes the live-action movies, that includes the theatrical movies, all the direct-to-video, all that stuff. There was a whole comment section of other people chiming in with their fully ranked top 48 Scooby-Doo movies. I didn't know the Scooby-Doo fandom was that active, and I am not judging. We are the Weekly Suit Gundam people, we get it. But, there are people who have gone through all 48 Scooby-Doo movies and have strong opinions on how to rank from 48 to 1 all the Scooby-Doo movies, and I tip my hats to you, sir.
Oh my god, I've pulled up the Scooby-Doo Wikipedia and scrolled down to the bottom where you can open up the little thing that has all the links. And yeah, the direct-to-video animated films section is terrifyingly big. Like, it's huge. And that doesn't even actually have all of them, because you have the television films and specials, which is where I guess Boo Brothers is.
Yes.
Yes, because Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, I've seen that one. Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, I've seen that one, and then it stops there. I've never seen Scooby-Doo and the... Oh, wait, no. I think maybe I have. I looked at the poster. That looks familiar. Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. That is the one that I have not seen. So the last Scooby-Doo movie I saw was Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders. I probably saw it on Cartoon Network in sometime around the year 2000.
So those four, the Zombie Island through the Cyber Chase, apparently Scooby-Doo fans are huge fans of. And I kind of want to revisit them. They're really good, and they were also done by a Japanese studio that animated them. And they're known for having really good art, which Scooby-Doo, being a Hanna-Barbera thing, is not traditionally known for. So maybe, we'll get to the Scooby-Doo season of Japanimation Station. Probably not. But
there was a Scooby-Doo movie last year on direct-to-video. It's Scooby-Doo and Crypto 2, which is a Scooby-Doo and Crypto the Superdog crossover. Like I was saying earlier in this episode,
watch that.
Crypto's never gone away, man. He's always been here.
I would absolutely watch that. I'm looking that up right now. Phoebe, we can make a night of that. Anyway, all right. Parker had one other more serious question for us that we're probably amusingly going to spend less time on. And that was, if you cooperated, so you and me together, I guess, are the managers, a repertory cinema that had a theme for your screenings each night of the week, e.g. Mondays are Swedish horror, Tuesdays are pre-2000 superhero films, etc., what might your themes be? Bonus points for hyper-specific answers.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, there obviously has to be one mecha-themed night. I mean, you can't get around that. I don't know if we want to add any conditions on top of it being a mech thing, but there's for sure one mech thing. Yes.
I think like a giant robots night that is like the class I did. Anything that could have gone in that class could go in there. Yeah. I think, you know what? Because we're planting this flag, there's going to be just an Orson Welles night. Just every night of the week you can come watch an Orson Welles thing. Either a movie he made or a movie he was in. I think that'll be fun. I think we should have that.
I'm going to type these ideas down because we need to figure out the days of the week. So we've got giant robots, we've got Orson Welles.
All right. What other ones for you, Sean?
That's a good question. Giant robots, Orson Welles. I mean, I feel like
kaiju movies.
Oh yeah, of course, kaiju. That's our other kaiju films. We can do kaiju films, which obviously will have some intersection with giant robots, but there's plenty of kaiju films that don't feature giant robots. You can kind of pick and choose there.
Just as Zatoichi movies, just all 26, and then we just start going through the TV episodes.
Yes.
I don't know.
We can start a project to get the TV show episodes brought over here, because most of them there's no way to get them with English subtitles, which is a fucking shame. They should be out here.
Yeah.
So yes, we could do the Zatoichi movies, and then maybe at some point we go through all those, and then we can do some other like weirdly long series of very specific movies. Because eventually we're gonna have other ones.
Yeah.
So weirdly long series of movies.
I'm naming a night just psychoanalysis nights. That'll be, obviously there's going to be a lot of David Lynch, but just look, I have a lot of movies I can show under the broad heading of psychoanalysis, so I think we need a night of the week that is just movies that are very psychoanalytical.
Yes, I think that's very good. We should have a silent movies night.
Yes, that's good.
Just like for, it's like in Nobi, and not only do you have to watch a silent movie, you have to be in complete silence. If you make a noise, you get kicked out of the movie theater.
Okay, but that's not how silent movies were ever shown. That would be a horrible way to show silent movies.
Well, that's how they need to be enjoyed today. They're silent movies, so you must be silent.
Okay.
Maybe we can implement a strike-like system where if you make a noise once, there's the one strike, two strikes, three strikes, and you're thrown out of the theater, and you can never come back. You never can return.
I'm a little offended at the idea of watching silent movies with absolutely no accompaniment, because that's like ahistoric, but okay. Let's see what else.
You should have like a machine like that reads records the decibels in the theater, and if it fucking triggers anything, it's just like, no, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm gonna have one. I'm going to have one called Challenge Night. Challenge Night is where I pick some of the weirdest stuff that I've seen in film school. And if you can make it to the end of the screening, I just string together either it's a really long movie that's hard to get through, it's a lot of like very aggressive avant-garde stuff, just like hyper-sexual avant-garde weird shit, all the like weird movies of nude bodies and people giving birth, just Challenge Night. And it's kind of like, those restaurants where you get like the 48-ounce steak, and if you eat it, you get your picture on the wall. If you get through Challenge Night, we'll refund your money and we'll put your picture on the wall.
That's very good. On one of the challenge nights, here's good, because I think sometimes it should be movies. Sometimes it should be like, really keep people on their toes. So one night there should just be, we should put a camera above the theater screen pointing at the audience and just put that on the screen and just have that just be there the whole day. It's like,
and whoever lasts longest,
yes.
But they have to be silent. They have to be quiet watching the screen. And if they have to get up for the bathroom or move to eat or anything like that, they're out and they don't get the prize. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Okay. So that's 7. That's a full week. I think this is good.
All right. Do we want to change any of the days on here?
Challenge Night is Sunday, because Sunday is the hardest day you could do that because you have to get up for work the next morning. So that makes it an extra challenge. Truly Silent Tuesdays. Yeah,
Truly Silent Tuesdays. That's good.
Okay.
Because I think that needs to be on a weekday. I feel like I want to put Giant Robots on Saturday. I feel like that's a good Saturday one.
Yeah. Let's see. Psychoanalysis. What is the most Freudian day of the week?
Hump Day. It's Wednesday.
Okay. Okay. Wednesday, Psychoanalysis night?
Yes.
Let's see, what else? Where do kaiju films go? Mothra Mondays. Even though it's not always Mothra.
Yeah.
Mothra Mondays featuring Godzilla.
Yes.
Okay. That's our
like
kaiju
the original Mothra versus Godzilla. Mothra got top billing,
That's very true. Let's see. For Orson Welles.
Yeah, it was that Thursday and Friday.
Let's make Friday. Let's see. Suntory Whiskey presents Orson Welles Fridays. If you don't know, go Google Suntory Whiskey and Orson Welles. And then I guess that leaves Zatoichi for Thursdays.
Yes.
Yes. Thursdays with Zatoichi. All right. So let's go through this, Sean. We've got Mothra Mondays featuring Godzilla. We've got Truly Silent Tuesdays. We've got Psychoanalysis Nights on Wednesdays. Thursdays with Zatoichi. Suntory Whiskey presents Orson Welles Fridays. Saturday, Giant Robots. And Sunday is Challenge Night at Sean and Jonathan's Cinerama.
I think we're in business, Jonathan. We should, I think we need to pool our funds together here, find a building somewhere we can buy. It's just some rundown rat-infested piece of shit that we can renovate, just get super cheap. I think we will reinvigorate the film business with this wonderful theater.